Mobile games are an unfortunate bunch. While there are many mobile games with genuine effort placed into them, far too many are bejeweled clones or worse, and they often monetarily exploit the player to the extreme. That being said, one game that ended up on phones really took the world by storm, enough so that it's basically on every platform on the planet, including the Nintendo DS. This game, of course, is Plants vs. Zombies, but is it as delicious as bacon or about as appetizing as raw garlic? At its very foundation, Plants vs. Zombies is a tower defense game. Not of the same variety as something like Field Runners, where you're building up a road of towers to damage enemies as they pass. The whole grid lawn is capable of being planted on, and you can and are encouraged to inhibit the zombies by blocking them off. Of course, the zombies are hardly just going to be walled out. They must enjoy some salad with their meat because they'll munch down on your plants if given the choice. You have 5 different types of levels, which consist of day, night, pool, fog, and roof. Day is pretty much the norm. It's a beautiful sunny day and zombies are trying to munch your brain. Sun randomly appears during the 3 daytime levels to bolster your defenses, and it's all grass tiles on this one. At night, sun no longer appears, making resources more tight, and tombstones also appear, bringing with them ambush zombies. The pool levels have 6 lanes, 2 of them being the pool itself. Fog levels are basically the pool at night, but has the addition of fog to blanket some of the level. On the roof, it's slanted, so non-lobbying plants will have a hard time attacking unless they're on the top of the slant. Your one and only true resource to manage is sun. While there's a coin currency, that's more for buying mini-games in certain plants. Sun is the only thing that truly matters in the middle of a stage. To that end, you'll probably want to plant some sunflowers as soon as possible to amp up production, themselves costing 50 sun each. There's also an upgrade for the sunflower you can get eventually called the twin sunflower that obviously pumps out twice the sun but costs 150 sun to pop over one. The time it takes for the seed slot to recharge is also fairly slow compared to the regular sunflower. The most offensive type plant is the humble pea shooter, costing 100 sun and having enough firepower to deal with low tier zombies like basics. While you can plant multiple to deal with bigger threats, that can only do so much and you'll eventually want to have something stronger. This is where the snow pea helpfully comes in, costing much more at 175 sun, but its shots also slow down enemies by quite a bit. This is very handy for dealing with more durable targets, notably bucketheads. The repeater is basically just a double pea shooter. It shoots twice at a time and even costs twice as much at 200 sun. A few of these can make short work of even more tough zombies. Of course, the Gatling gun is the penultimate single-lane pea shooter, stacking onto the repeater and doubling it further to 4 peas at a time. It isn't cheap, 250 sun on top of the repeater's 200 sun, but it's got space efficiency down pat and will even deal with the toughest of zombies. One that's sort of a utility is the split pea, which is a normal pea shooter going forward and a repeater going back. At 125 sun, it's handy if you can get the zombie behind the plant, like planting after they pass or using garlic, or against digger zombies. Now the 3-peater is a pretty interesting one. It costs 325 sun and technically only fires 1 pea, but that's 1 pea per 3 lanes. Some argue that it really isn't that useful as a plant due to the cost, but it can come in handy if you really need to multitask lanes and are out of room for whatever reason, like during the pool levels. It's situationally useful, but not one I use all that often outside of mandatory conveyor belt stages where it comes down the line. Of course, one really good ally for pea shooters is the torchwood. At 175 sun, it buffs peas into flaming peas, doing a ton of damage, especially with repeaters or Gatling peas. Just don't use it with snow peas, it conflicts just a bit. Then you've got instant use plants, and one of the most useful plants in the first game to me is the humble potato mine. Because it's so cheap, it's very effective to use on the single zombies in the beginning to set up your sunflowers to start cranking out sun with. It's a very efficient strategy and one that I almost always use personally. The squash is 25 extra sun from that, but compensates by having no warm-up time to attack. The second you plop that sucker down, it attacks all the zombies within the square and can obliterate most zombies on the spot. This makes it a very good emergency use plant since 50 sun is still fairly cheap and it even attacks zombies behind it, so you can still use it if a zombie's reached your plants. The cherry bomb is quite a bit more at 150 sun, but it compensates with its sheer stopping power. It blows up in a radius of 3x3 and is capable of just as much destruction as the potato mine or squash. If you've got a group of zombies and you're being completely overwhelmed, it can give you some breathing room. The jalapeno is limited to one lane and costs 125 sun, but it burns across the entire lane. This can be handy if one row is giving you a particular amount of trouble and it has the secondary effect of melting ice. If you're being overwhelmed by zombonis and need to get rid of its ice to cut off bobsled zombies, you'll find it very handy, especially for that one minigame. Then you've got the chomper, costing 150 sun. It eats any normal zombie in one bite, but then takes 42 seconds to swallow its meal, meaning it's very vulnerable. It's handy behind a walnut, but not the best plant option. Speaking of which, there's also defensive plants to consider. The walnut is the most basic, 50 sun cost, and has a good amount of defense, but is slow to recharge in the slot like most of the defensive plants. Tall nuts are basically taller, more durable walnuts that cost 125 sun, mostly for defanging zombies that like to leap over your defenses. Pumpkins have the same price as tall nuts and are only as strong as a walnut, but have the huge advantage of planting in the same tile as an existing plant. For this reason, the strongest defense is obviously a tall nut fortified by the pumpkin. Garlic is the most unorthodox, 50 sun to disgust zombies into neighboring lanes. It won't work on instant kill zombies that don't take bites, of course, but it lasts a pretty long amount of time since most zombies just bite once and then divert. The next category is shroom plants. They're meant for night use and by default sleep during the day. The most basic is the puff shroom, the most abusable plant in the game because it's basically a short-range pea shooter that you can plant for free. That means you're encouraged to spam them as much as physically possible. While far less useful during the day, you can still plant them to serve as a distraction with. The sun shroom is the alternative to the sunflower, initially producing 15 sun at a cost of 25 sun. This means the cost of production is in its favor, especially since it eventually grows and produces normal 25 sun. The scaredy shroom is basically the exact opposite of the puff shroom, long range but becomes, well, scared when zombies get too close to it. Mind you, this includes zombies on nearby lanes and other things like bungee zombies, so be careful about that. It also costs 25 sun, which is still quite cheap at night. The fume shroom is the first to not essentially be quirky, cheaper versions of other things like pea shooters and sunflowers. At a cost of 75 sun, it has a range of 4 spaces and its shot passes through zombies. This obviously makes it great for crowd control, or just the screen door zombies. The fume shroom can be upgraded to the gloom shroom for 150 sun, lacking range but more than making up for it by firing in all directions. This makes it insanely good for coursing zombies through lanes with garlic, and they can also support one another. The magnet shroom is a really good one, costing 100 sun and stealing metal from zombies. From helmets to pogo sticks, it defangs a lot of zombies coming your way. The only slight downside is it has some cooldown between magnetisms. You can upgrade it to a gold magnet for 50 sun and it works without a coffee bean, but it only draws in coins. It's useful for coin farming and that's about it. There's also a couple of instant use mushrooms you can use. Starting off is the ice shroom, the closest to the iceberg lettuce from the second game. At a reasonable price of 75 sun, it freezes all zombies on screen for a little while. This has some other effects in other stages too, but mostly the freezing thing. It's handy if you just want some extra time. The doom shroom is the ultimate instant use plant at 125 sun. Packing the power of a cherry bomb in a beefy 7x5 area, it wipes out everything but gargantuars, but in turn leaves a crater for 3 minutes. The most unique instant use is the hypno shroom at 75 sun. It basically turns a zombie that eats into your ally and it heads the other direction fighting zombies along the way. A lot of people throw shade on this shroom and it's certainly very situational, but it's helpful if you've got a mostly healthy football zombie or a dancer zombie since it summons brainwashed helpers. Now, the Grave Buster technically isn't a shroom plant, but it's pretty much usable exclusively at night due to the tombstones being there. Costing 75 sun, it eats the grave and gets rid of it. Mind you, it can be eaten itself while eating, so be careful when you use it. Likewise, the coffee bean isn't a shroom, but it makes shrooms usable during the day. This can come very much in handy for some shrooms like the fume/gloom shroom or doom shroom. There are also a few aquatic plants for the 2 types of levels that have a pool in them. The humble lily pad needs no introduction. You can plant your plants on them and they're pretty basic and cheap at 25 sun. Tangle kelp is an interesting sort of instant use plant. Since it costs 25 sun, it could probably be compared to the potato mine, but it doesn't need to arm at the cost of only taking out a single zombie. Very useful for tougher zombies like bucketheads and snorkel zombies, mind you. The cattail is quite pricey at 225 sun, upgraded from a lily pad, but fires as fast as a repeater and attacks zombies in any lane. It prioritizes zombies closest to it, which makes sense because self-preservation. For a combination of both shroom and water, you've got the sea shroom. It recharges a lot slower than the puff shroom, but is still free and somewhat spammable since zombies don't often appear in the pool. This transitions us into fog plants. The planturn costing 25 sun clears away fog in a 5x7 area around it. Very cheap and very useful for seeing into the fog, but planturn has no offensive capabilities to speak of and doesn't have any enhanced durability. For this reason, it's very vulnerable to being eaten and should be protected with pumpkins or other forms of defense. The blowover can temporarily blow away fog without taking up space and helps with balloon zombies, but at a cost of 100 sun each time. You could also use the cactus, which is basically a pea shooter at 125 sun that can pop balloons. However, unless they're over the pool, the balloon zombie is still a threat, unlike the blowover which just yeets them off the field. Then you've got the starfruit, the plant that's almost in a league of its own at 125 sun. It's a very peculiar plant in that it fires in the 5 directions of its points. It's angled so it won't fire directly in front of it, but it'll fire slanted upwards and downwards indirectly behind it. It also fires directly above and below it. Put simply, it's not that good for defending in front of it, but zombies on other lanes, diggers and the like are great for it. Spam them out and you've got an extremely powerful line of attacks watching each other's backs. The final level-based group is for the roof. For starters, you need pots at 25 sun to even plant up there, no natural ground to be found. The most basic roof-based plant at 100 sun, attacking upwards to get over the angle of the roof. Much like all of the pult lobbing plants, it can get around screen doors, newspapers, and ladders. This category even attacks snorkel zombies when they're submerged. Since the cost is the same as a pea shooter, it's mostly an upgrade outside of not being able to use it with torchwood. The kernel pult is an interesting side grade to the cabbage pult because it costs 100 sun too and fires weaker kernels. That would sound bad, but it has a chance of lobbing butter, which does normal damage and stuns the targeted zombie for a while. With the exception of vehicular zombies, it can stun any zombie, including gargantuars. This means a group of them can be pretty useful. For a whopping 500 sun, 2 of them can be upgraded to the cob cannon, essentially giving you a cherry bomb every just under 35 seconds. You just point where you want it to fire. It may be super impractical in most cases, but a column of them works great in endless survival or last stand. Of course, the real powerhouse is the melon pult. Costing a hefty 300 sun, it dishes out a lot of damage and does splash damage. It's good against just about every type of zombie in the game. For 200 sun, it can even be upgraded to the winter melon, which adds the same ice effect as the snow pea except with a bonus of splash damage and damage output of the regular melon. The umbrella leaf isn't nearly as glamorous, but it's a very useful plant for the bungee and catapult zombies. Very situational, but only costs 100 sun and even bounces bungee zombies, bringing in other zombies for flag ambushes. Given how annoying that could be throughout the roof levels, it's really good to have in those circumstances. Obviously, survival and endless benefit due to both zombie types appearing there. I should probably mention the spikeweed, a rather unique plant costing 100 sun. It basically serves as a bed of spikes, damaging most zombies that walk across it. It also pops the tires of vehicles at the cost of being destroyed, and gargantuars stop to smash it. It can be upgraded to spike rock for 125 sun, doing more damage and able to handle 9 vehicles and smashes instead of just 1. This makes them really useful for thwarting instant destruction zombies, even if it's just to stall gargantuars. Finally, marigold produce coins every so often. It does synergize pretty well with the gold magnet for coin farming on Last Stand Endless. You have quite a variety of zombies coming after you, of course. The game almost always goes easy on you with singular zombies popping in to make it easier to set up your plants. Regular zombies are your bread and butter undead. They die relatively quickly to anything. Coneheads and bucketheads are basically zombies with more health, although the bucketheads can be stripped of their protection with magnet shrooms. Pole vaulting zombies on the ground and dolphin rider zombies in the water like to jump over your plants, but you can use the tall nut to prevent that. The newspaper zombie is actually an interesting one. His newspaper doesn't take much to destroy, but he becomes enraged and moves faster when it's destroyed. He must really be cross about his crossword puzzle. The screen door zombie doesn't get upset about his door being destroyed, but compensates by having it take much more damage. Snow peas are also useless against it. However, anything that doesn't attack directly forward, such as thorns and fumes and pults, go right over it. The screen door can also be magnetized, although that can be a curse if you have other ways of dealing with it and want to, say, prioritize for football zombies. Speaking of which, the football zombie basically combines the buckethead with a pole vault minus the pole vaulting. So moves fast and has a lot of health, but at least the helmet can be magnetized to make it more vulnerable. The dancing zombie will summon 4 backup dancers around him and will summon additional ones as they're killed. This is seemingly done at random, allowing him to potentially bypass some of your defenses. You'll want to use thorns and fume shrooms to deal with as quickly as possible. The snorkel zombie will submerge into water, not taking any damage from anything except lobbing plants. Of course, they'll make themselves vulnerable to eat your plants, and they're also vulnerable to tangle kelp. The Zomboni is the first of 2 vehicle zombies in the game, crushing your plants and leaving an ice trail behind. Let it get too far with that and you'll have to deal with bobsleds that are basically 4 zombies on a bobsled that skid along the ice trail. Squash and spikeweed work great against here, and the jalapeno can actually destroy the ice. Jack-in-the-Box zombies are basically walking cherry bombs, in other words, very dangerous. You can magnetize his box or even just hypno-shroom him to turn him against the zombies, but generally just kill him ASAP. Digger zombies are quite annoying, digging all the way across your lawn and then turning around and attacking them from behind. Its pickaxe can be magnetized, but even that's risky as it'll just pop up wherever it was, potentially getting into your defenses. Using pumpkins in your bag plants as well as star fruits, split peas, and gloom shrooms work great on them. The pogo zombie jumps over your plants, essentially a slower pole vault zombie that doesn't lose its vault. The tall nut still works, as does a magnet shroom. Bungee zombies might be the most annoying enemy in the game, either bringing in ambush zombies or trying to steal one of your plants. A high enough concentration of damage can destroy them before they take your plants, but it can be difficult. I recommend the umbrella leaf. The ladder zombie is basically a screen door zombie that can plant its ladder on defense plants to allow it and other zombies over them. It also has the screen door's weakness, thankfully, so use pulse and magnet shrooms. The catapult zombie is actually a long-range zombie, lobbing basketballs at the farthest back plant, and pumpkins won't work on them. The umbrella leaf will protect against the basketballs, but it can also crush your plants, so destroy ASAP. Finally, the big behemoth itself, the almighty Gargantuar. This oversized freak has a ton of health, instantly crushes plants, and throws its little imp into your defenses at around half health. It's the only one that instant kill plants won't take out in a single hit, having equivalent health for 2 of them. Survival Endless even has Giga Gargantuars, packing red eyes and twice the health. The Zombie Yeti is pretty unique, only appearing in level 4-10 after having beaten Adventure Mode. It doesn't really attack and it flees after a little bit. The idea is to quickly kill it to get the diamonds and possibly chocolate it possesses. Think of it like a piñata, you gotta whack it to win your prize. Finally, it's the biggest and baddest zombie of them all, the man of the hour. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Dr. Edgar Zambos. Riding inside what looks like a big robotic gargantuar, it's a wonder this big guy doesn't sink the roof of your house. Plopping down zombies, having bungee zombies on rope, and randomly throwing a van at your plants, he's quite a hassle. Occasionally he'll lower the robot's big head, making him vulnerable to attack. He also fires fire and ice shots that can only be stopped by the ice shroom and jalapeno respectively to avoid losing a row of plants. Now it is a conveyor belt level rather than a normal one, so you don't really have to worry about sun resources. Just plant your plants in the best areas to deal with the zombies and you're good. And speaking of conveyor belt, there are mini games, puzzles, and otherwise abnormal levels to keep the formula from getting stale. You've even got mini games where you straight up play walnut bowling or you just play whack-a-zombie. They range from an aquarium mini game with snorkel zombies you have to feed brains to a bejeweled game using plants. Zombotany is especially interesting because it has zombies with plant heads like pea shooter or walnut. The second one actually adds Gatlin peas, jalapenos, squash, and tall nut zombies. Survival is what you'd think with increasingly tough zombies, while Last Stand gives you a certain amount of sun in between with no way of getting more except randomly from zombies. You gotta plan out your defenses for that wave. Notably, iZombie actually allows you to play as the zombies trying to get around the defenses with a set amount of sun. Eating sunflowers is how you get more, and you have to reach the brains at the end of each row. It's probably my favorite of the puzzles because of how unique it is. Facebreaker is okay too. It has zombies and plants randomly inside vases that you have to smash open. Aside from occasionally green vases, it can be very much luck of the draw, although squashes are very useful. You've also got a Zen garden that allows you to water, grow, and then use bug sprayer and music box to keep your plants happy. They then generate coins that you can have Stinky the Snail help you collect, but he quickly falls asleep. Chocolate, though, makes him faster and keeps him alert for an hour. You can also buy habitats for water and night-based plants. Basically, it has a surprising amount of replay value for what's easily seen as a very simple mobile game. Honestly, between it and Angry Birds, I think it offers so much more, and it can be interesting coming up with tactics to deal with whatever's ahead of you, especially keeping with achievements like using only shrooms and coffee bean in a daytime level. It's a very addictive and fun game from a gameplay perspective, which is obviously the most vital part to its simplistic nature. 2 undead thumbs up for this aspect. The story involves a very rich plot about Dave making his last desperate stand against Edgar Zambos by bravely engineering deadly plants to save humanity. Just kidding, it's essentially a phone type of game. The plot isn't nearly so melodramatic. Dave just so happens to have killer plant seeds, because Zomboss has created an army of zombies and wants your brain, because about the only thing that happens story-wise, apart from some crudely written messages by the zombies, is right as Dave is about to tell you how to beat Zomboss, a bungee grabs him. The bungee doesn't kill him though, and is seen bouncing him around in the credits. The zombies just kinda give up after Zomboss is defeated and just want to make a music video, presumably having lost their taste for brains. Well, until the second game, but that's neither here nor there. My point is, it's a very simple story and it's the gameplay you want to focus on. Plants vs. Zombies uses a fairly cartoony style, of course, so it's a very lighthearted take on a zombie apocalypse. What is noteworthy is that, with the exception of the very compromised DS port, it uses a sort of 2D skeletal animation system. Parts of plants or zombies or Dave or whoever is assembled like a puppet. It allows for some very smooth animation since it's essentially doing the same thing as an armature in a 3D game. The zombies and plants are pretty visually distinct from one another as they should be, and there's enough variety that it never gets dull to look at. From the glistening in the pool to projectiles splattering against a zombie's head to the nice brightness up to signify damage feedback, it's fairly an eye-candy affair. There's also plenty of charm and personality in the animations, like the squash shifting its eyes towards its target before stomping down. It'll even splash into the water if used in a pool, which is kinda funny. It really is a shame that the Michael Jackson estate threatened Popcap, even though it's clearly a parody, because it means the Michael Jackson parody had to turn into a disco zombie instead. Not that I'm knocking the disco look, of course, but I kind of liked the thriller look it had going on before. Another thing that's kind of a funny touch is that zombies in the pool actually have tube floaties. The music, though, is probably the most noteworthy part of the presentation because the music is very catchy as a whole. It ranges from the whimsical charm of the roof music to the more club jazzy night levels music, especially its horde music. It's the music you're hearing right now, actually. Zomboss's boss theme is straight up epic sounding, and I never get tired of hearing it. Many games and Ultimate Battles also have their own music to somewhat break things up, and 4-10's hauntingly devoid of music to emphasize the lightning strikes. It's probably the closest Plants vs. Zombies gets to genuine horror, and it can be a little unsettling. It does contain a mild amount of voice acting, with zombies vocalizing their enjoyment of gray matter and Dave speaking as Simlish, but nothing too crazy. Most of the voice acting is in the credits song, where presumably the Sunflower had a voice all this time. Who knew? Presentation-wise, the game is ridiculously charming. The visuals are pleasing to look at in an almost cute aesthetic, and the music is absolutely catchy. I wouldn't recommend the DS version for this, since that version is understandably chopped down by system limitations, but if that's your only choice, it's still a good game even there. Still, I have to recommend the other versions, especially for its beautiful presentation. When you boil it down, Plants vs. Zombies is a very fun game. There's so many ways to play this game too, from consoles to PC to phones and even to DS, there's really no excuse not to try it out. The iOS version is even free, and I highly recommend it if you somehow have yet to play it. It really is a shame that the second one fell prey to EA's greed, but that's a story for another time. It invigorated the tower defense genre, even though I'm sure it wasn't the first of its type, and inspired more than its fair share of clones. If you want a good tower defense game that's cute and charming, this is the game for you. It can be pretty addictive, especially going for the extra stuff you have to buy from Dave's shop. With in-game coins, of course. This has been my review of Plants vs. Zombies. Thank you so much for tuning in with me. My Zelda Skyward Sword livestream continues tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. and more video game news is next Sunday at 6 p.m. This is all Eastern Standard Time, but you can always subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified. A like always helps, but I just hope you genuinely enjoyed yourself. Peace out, have a good one, capitalize on life, and have a nice and pleasant day.